But I've got some questions about recruiters.
Nice.
Why do people hate them so much?
Yeah, nice. Thanks for that.
Any favourite memories from childhood?
There's certain things from my dad's job that stick with me from childhood. So he ended up working in fingerprints, becoming head of Cumbria Fingerprints Bureau. And there was a special sort of cupboard where they used to basically take fingerprints from people that had been found. I always remember being given little jars with genuine fingers that were used to take fingerprints, and ultimately found convicted people from catching these as literally a 10, 12, 13-year-old.
What would you say are the key skills that would make an engineer successful, or just someone in manufacturing successful?
Understand you as a person, and ultimately what you enjoy, what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like.
Any interview horror stories? I've got one I can remember that happened to me. I went for an interview, sat in a room, I was here, the hiring manager was there, HR lady was opposite me. The hiring manager didn't say a word, just stared at me the whole time, right to the side of my head. And then right at the end said, when I'm trying to find myself a good sales guy is like when I'm trying to find myself a good woman. That was the end of the interview. Huge thanks to this week's podcast sponsor, AMFG. This is what they do.
For over 10 years, AMFG has been providing our award-winning software used by hundreds of job shops across the world. Whether you are a 5-man or 500-man shop, our estimating and quoting tool can help you speed up and streamline your quoting process. Say goodbye to quoting headaches. Our tool can help your estimators cut time to quote by up to 90%, allowing you to save time and win more business. Using AMFG, you can remove guesswork and unpredictability from your quoting process, giving you the ability to achieve consistent plus or minus 5% accuracy across RFQs, ensuring your customers receive fast, reliable responses. Quote your way. AMFG provides a fully customizable solution using your business's quoting logic to make sure that your quotes reflect your business. Our software harnesses feature recognition and service and material selection to generate your quote in minutes. Book a demo and transform your estimating and quoting. AMFG, tomorrow's manufacturing today.
If you want to learn more, the link's in the bio, please click it. Also, while you're here, another huge thank you to you guys for supporting us. Please like and subscribe, it helps us grow. So, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you do.
Yeah, sure, Tom. My name's Matt Foster, work for Wynne Consulting. I'm a director, been working here for, 18 years now?
Okay, so go back 20 years then. Where did you grow up? What did you want to be when you were older?
So, yeah, I'm from Penrith in Cumbria. Went to primary, secondary school there, met my wife when we were both 11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, first day of secondary school. So yeah, I've basically spent most of my life in the rural sort of Cumbria Lake District, and then when I was 20, me and my wife went to sort of university in Preston. She went to Lancaster.
Okay. Any favourite memories from childhood?
No. I don't think when you live in the Lake District you really appreciate it.
Yeah.
As a teenager, I'd always had a big thing with wanting to go into the police force. So there's certain things from my dad's job that stick with me from childhood, and some are slightly quirky, weird.
So was your dad a police officer?
So my dad wanted to be a police officer, and I think it was his eyesight back in those days. He didn't get in. So he ended up working in fingerprints, becoming head of Cumbria Fingerprints Bureau, and then later on in his career, Lancashire. So I used to go to the sort of Cumbria headquarters quite a lot.
Okay.
He had a colleague who was really quirky that always used to take me to the scenes of crime department. So he used to show me all the pictures of basically car crashes and sort of bodies that were found at the bottom of lakes. And then there was a special sort of cupboard where they used to basically take fingerprints from people that had been found. So I always remember being given little jars with sort of genuine fingers that were used to take fingerprints.
At 11?
And ultimately found sort of convicted people from, catching these as literally a 10, 12, 13-year-old. So...
Well, that's probably the best favourite childhood memory of
It's not. No. It's definitely not a favourite childhood memory. It's sort of one of the ones that sticks sort of with me. And obviously, I'm 18 years down the line, having been at one company in recruitment, and I always thought I'd be a policeman.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm pretty far away from that line of work.
Okay. So, go to university. Did you have jobs at that point? Any jobs before Wynne?
So. Never got pocket money, and I always remember Friday night the video sort of sweet shop man turned up in his van trying to beg me dad for 20p, age of 13, no pocket money. Occasionally now and again he'll let me have 20p, get some sweets. So I'd always been on a lookout for a job. So I've had lots of jobs up until I got my first full-time job. So I worked at a caravan park in a pub, pot washing, and then sort of waiting on for a couple of years. Worked at a hotel. Again, they used to bus load essentially OAPs in, like 60 at a time that would stay for like 5 days. Every single one I used to serve told me I looked like their grandson, reminded them of their grandson. I used to get some nice tips, Werther's Originals, and then I ended up working throughout uni, and we took a gap year before I went to uni at Centre Parks in Penrith. So I worked in the sweet shop, the supermarket, toy shop, sports shop. That was really good. So when I was at uni though, I didn't actually sort of work. I basically came back occasionally on the weekends and over the sort of holiday periods.
Okay. And
basically robbed a load of sweets from the sweet shop and got moved out of that one quite quickly. So yeah.
Okay, and family life now, 2 kids, load of cats.
Yeah, so yeah, we had kids quite early. I actually had, so finished uni, went to working, came back to Preston and got a part-time job at Next for 3 months, both me and my wife, then girlfriend. We actually, I went for an interview with Wynne Consulting whilst at Next, and between the first and second interview, there was like a 4-week gap because the MD, Simon, had got married, was going on holiday. And in between the first and second interview, when I came back, it was like, anything interesting happened in the 4 weeks since I've been gone? I was like, yeah. We're expecting our first kid. So I work part-time in Next. I kind of need a proper job.
How old were you?
So I would have been 23.
Okay, scary times then.
22 I would have been, yeah. So 22. Don't get me wrong, I'd been with my girlfriend since we were sort of, 16. I already knew I was about to propose to her later on that year, because for my birthday she got me some tickets to a concert, and I thought, right, I'm going to propose. I'm going to propose at the concert.
Yep.
And then literally a month or 2 later, we found out we were expecting. So, yeah, that was an interesting time.
So talk us through that then. Let's go into that. So how did you deal with your first step into a proper career at the same time becoming a dad at a reasonably young age?
So I started in September 2006 at Wynne. My wife's parents had just moved permanently to Greece, so we had no family. Her family, none of them were around us. They were all in the northeast and in Crete permanently.
Wow.
We briefly went back to Penrith for like a month after uni or 2, got a month's worth of rent money saved up, went back to sort of Preston with literally no money, looking for a quick part-time job. I had my first interview, then found out I was pregnant, had my second interview, got the job luckily. I think you could see that I had a purpose and a reason to sort of work hard. Started a bit later, so I actually started a couple of months after I got the job in September. And our son was due to be born in February. And my wife's waters actually went in my second month at work, sort of 2 months early. So she was in hospital for 2 weeks, bed rest, and we had him 6 weeks early, actually. So my sort of first 3 months in the job were pretty crazy. We just moved house. We'd smashed the kitchen to bits while she was pregnant. Then she went into labour, begged her dad to come back from Crete because he was a plumber, fit as a kitchen. And then for 2 weeks whilst my wife was in hospital, I went to work at 8 in the morning, finished work at 5:30, went straight to hospital for what turned out to be 5 weeks, because they kept him in for quite a few weeks after.
Yep.
And we got to take him home on New Year's Day, 27, which was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a bit scary, wasn't planned, great surprise, but obviously not planned. We definitely found it tough, both juggling work, money, newborn baby, and literally no family sort of around us. But I think my outlook on life with everything is just optimistic, it'll be fine.
Was that always the case? Was you always optimistic?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Literally everything. We can have a meteorite coming towards the earth. I'll see it in the garden. I'll tell my wife, it'll be fine. It'll probably miss us. Yeah. I'll put the kettle on. I don't know if it's a protection mechanism to not deal with tough stuff.
Yeah.
But ultimately, my outlook to everything is there's a solution. There really is. Whether it's in your personal life, whether it's in work. For me, it's we can look at this negatively and not get anywhere, or we can view it positively, optimistically, and try and make it work.
Okay. That's a pretty cool story to tell.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the good ones. Oh. You'll be pleased to hear.
And he's just turned 18 now.
Oh, amazing.
Which is, again,
convinced him to be an engineer or not?
So I absolutely don't push. I've got 2 kids, 13 and 18. Don't push them with regards to what job you should do. I didn't feel forced to be a policeman, but I think because it was close to home, I felt natural that, maybe I should be a policeman. Yeah. My kids, unlike me, are quite artistic, like my wife. So I think they're perhaps going to be a bit more open-minded and go into something a bit more creative. But literally the other day, driving him to college, he asked me if I knew about project management. So I was like, okay, why'd you ask that? He was like, well, we live near BAE Systems, and one of his friends was looking at apprenticeships, not in project management, but another type of apprenticeship for next year with BAE. So I think possibly engineering is on the cards with my son Jed, but not because I forced him to go down that route. My daughter on the
must
other
have rubbed
side.
off, they probably heard
definitely.
you talk about it so much that.
Oh yeah, I've the last year I've got a rule now where when I'm in the car, if I'm ever picking them up from school or dropping them off, I don't do work calls. But literally for 15 years, I am on the phone 24/7 in the car or out and about. And yeah, literally the other day, my daughter said, "What on earth were you talking about?" On the phone in the house, in the office the other day. But yeah, it's quite common, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, at least the recruitment bit hasn't rubbed off on them.
No, well, I definitely think my daughter could be in sales because she's got me wrapped around her, honestly, a little finger.
It's like all daughters, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Whereas my son's definitely more analytical, detail-orientated, studying for his exams at the minute. And he's definitely got a little bit more focus than I had as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, or continue to have now.
Whoa.
Right, so next, into Wynne. You've been there, you said 18, your LinkedIn says 19 years.
I'll be over, just over 18.
Yeah. So you're now in a director position. So talk me through how you go from working in Next to being a director of a recruitment firm.
So when I joined, we were a start-up business, so we'd been going about a year. The 2 directors, Chris and Simon, had previously had, I think, 5 and 2 years experience working for the same recruitment company. I was the 4th person to join, I think. Initially, our sort of philosophy when we bring people in, certainly back in those days, was you bring somebody in, without any recruitment experience, with a degree. We were quite open to what degree that was, but we wanted somebody that had invested financially in basically education, if you will, that perhaps had a mentality that I now need to justify the expense to friends and family and myself to why I've put this massive bit of debt on top of me. So I was brought in as a trainee consultant research. I was given a couple of sectors within automation and controls and system integration, and my job was to support, I think at the time it was Chris, a lead recruiter, with all his projects. So he'd get a project for project manager, control system engineer, business development manager, sales director, and my job was to help him with research and companies and names and line-up calls and meetings and all that kind of stuff. The ultimate aim was to move within a year or two into a consultant's role, but critically having understood for a year or two a particular industry within the vast sort of spectrum of engineering organisations in the UK.
So how did you pick up that? Is it just talking to hundreds of people, you sort of pick up on keywords and how things work, you have to then go away and learn?
So I'm obviously not an engineer, I've got a business degree, so I had to really understand, I guess, the basics of the industry. So a lot of my career I focused on senior management and particularly sales account management roles. So I don't have to program PLCs or anything like that, but I have to understand fundamentally how they operate, how they relate to other products, and it's basically been done by researching, Googling, looking at companies, and critically, I think at the start of my career, I wanted to look at the bigger companies, your Schneiders, your ABBs, your Rockwells, your Siemens within my certain sector, and look at their complete sort of product portfolio. Once I'd clicked onto a certain industry that I felt was a high growth industry or a new technology industry within one of their divisions, I then go and find the smaller startup and specialist companies, SMEs, that operate within those sort of areas. And again, research them, speak to people that work for those types of companies, be it directors, hiring managers, or engineers that have skill sets that might be linked to it.
There's a lesson in there for young people actually watching, not necessarily to become a recruiter, but you know, even when I was at college on an apprenticeship, I had no clue what a PLC was, or a drive, or a servo.
All right.
I still don't, you know. But actually, there's probably thousands of young people that will watch this that are in university or they're at college. They do a lot of theory at school, but they don't see products. So it is about going out and being proactive and speaking to people in industry. You know, reach out to people like us. That's why LinkedIn's so good. But for a young person to actually have, it's why we're trying to push Engineers Insight actually as an app to education, just so kids can see things instead of just the lecturer writing it on a whiteboard.
When I started LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn only launched the year I started with Wynne Consulting. So when I was researching sort of companies, there wasn't an easy platform to kind of visualize and see what these companies do. You went on websites, and let's be honest, websites 20 years ago.
Some of them aren't great now.
Still, absolutely. But 20 years ago, you're not getting moving videos that show robots and all this kind of cool stuff, automated warehousing systems and so on. So earlier on in my career, what I genuinely loved is getting to go with our MD or our senior sort of recruiter, Chris at the time, on visits. So they'd be going to see I remember pretty much all my first 4 or 5 visits of companies. Went to see an integrator in the West Midlands called ATM, robotics integrator. Went to a company called Guttridge that, what they did, sort of feed handling, capital equipment machinery. We went to a drive automation sort of HMI company. But I definitely learnt more there and then. Speaking to the directors, and quite often Chris or Simon would go, Matt's relatively new, he hasn't got a clue, tell him what we do. Like our MD's an engineer, his background was he did an engineering degree, so it comes probably a bit simpler to him, but he knew I didn't really have much of a clue.
Yeah.
So there was nothing better than, like you say, walking around, what's this, what's that?
Yeah, it's why the exhibitions are good for students as well. To actually see that many people in one room and ask questions and talk
100%.
about careers. And,
Yeah.
okay, right. So that's your development through Wynne.
Yeah, and so we were senior recruiter,
Yep.
and then having been there quite a while, I wanted to get into management.
Yep.
I grew my area, I focused on the sales side of the business, and we complemented our engineering and software recruiters with recruiters that specialised more on the sales side. And after sort of developing a number of staff, colleagues in those sort of areas, had the opportunity, was basically told they were going to make me a director of the business, which was nice.
Which was nice.
Which was nice.
Yeah. Is that your proudest achievement? In them 19 years, can you think of one standout?
I don't know. Obviously, I'm proud of it, but I don't think it's the thing I would tell people if asked.
Okay.
So early on in my career, I think for me, as any fledgling salesperson in any industry sort of would probably relate to, is getting that target company you wanted to work for, that the first time you call them, the second, the first year, don't even want to entertain you.
Yep.
And you're thinking to yourself, am I wasting my time? Have I aimed too high? And I remember one of the MDs saying, one of the directors saying, possibly too big, probably in a few years we could look at it. But I was like, right, that sounds like a challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think within 2 years of doing the role, managed to get my first meeting with Siemens and eventually got onto Siemens sort of recruitment sort of list, which was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically cemented and grew on that throughout the sort of years and covered a lot of their different divisions, moving into switchgear, transmission distribution, rotating machinery, turbo machinery kind of stuff over in Lincoln Way. That was definitely a proud moment because, again, I put a challenge on myself that I didn't know if I'd achieve, but it eventually paid off.
Yep.
That's definitely one of them. It's funny because now I look at little achievements. I don't have one big massive goal. I think if you have in your life, I want that multi-million-pound house, I think you waste a lot of your time with something that you'll be in for 6 months and you're like, oh, this house is just normal to me now. It's like my first company car, I loved it.
Yep.
Within 3 months of converting from my Ford KA that was dropping to bits, that was left to us by my wife's parents when they moved to Greece because no one would buy it, to move into my company car, I couldn't believe it.
Yep.
Within 3 or 4 months, it's so normalised that I'm looking for the next thing that I want to move into, and you almost don't appreciate it.
Yeah,
so
and I suppose you see that from candidates actually, thinking about how often, especially these days, people move jobs quite often, right? And I'm guilty of this. We've spoke a lot over the years of just wanting the next thing all the time. Everyone wants the next pay rise or the next job title or a move to a bigger brand. It's the same concept. People just need the next thing all the time.
Yeah, but I think having smaller goals in life, you'll get a lot more happiness by kind of focusing in on the littler things. Yeah. So for me, it's helping a small SME that are struggling to recruit because they've not got a big name. They need an engineer that can wear a few different hats, or a salesperson that's technical and commercial, whereas a bigger corporate can have an application engineer to back up a salesperson on a customer visit. So these smaller businesses find it difficult, and I've definitely had really proud moments in my career where I've helped and continue to help smaller companies that are really struggling to compete and find their place in a very competitive market where your big corporates just buy up sort of businesses for a market or one tiny bit of technology they've got, and they've got loads of identical products or very similar products for 75% of what that business did, which is a bit of a shame. Can think of lots of examples which I won't name, but
Well, I've got some questions about recruiters.
Right, okay, good ones. Nice.
Why do people hate them so much?
Oh, right, okay.
That's a good start.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for that. I think I think definitely recruitment does have, sitting in my chair here a bit uncomfortable. I I think the perception of recruitment, you've got two angles. You've got how candidates view recruitment. So if I've spoken to you and put you forward for a role, or I've spoken to you, put you for a role, you've got an interview, the big issue that I think candidates have with recruitment companies is a lack of communication and critically feedback. So I've spoke to a recruiter, they put me forward for a role, I've not heard back from them. Have they put me forward? Do they want to interview me? Why was a no if I was a no? And in even, dare I say, when you've actually had interviews, quite often recruitment companies, from what I can see on LinkedIn, and when I speak to candidates, they get ghosted. So they rang a recruiter, have you got any feedback yet? It's been a week. Message them and literally get nothing back. Ultimately, we're a service business. Like all through my career, although I've had one permanent job, every single job I've had is a customer-facing, service-led sort of business where I've got to give feedback regularly and be the front of the company, whether it's waiting or standing in front of a shop. Check out, you've got to be that sort of constant for them that can give them feedback and help them in whatever they do.
Yeah, an arm around the shoulder sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the big problem perhaps recruitment companies have is it's based on short-term quick wins. Monthly targets, they're paid monthly bonuses in 99% of recruitment companies. So they're only interested in what you're doing that month. We need to get another deal. So you need to get more people on interview, you need to get more jobs, and actually do I want to spend that 10% of my time giving feedback to people that's going to generate me no money? Because they're not yes for an interview, they're no after having an interview, or I'm going to use that extra bit of time, 10-20%, to go and find more candidates that might get me the money. Do you know what? I'll do that. And that's really poor. From a customer perspective, I've had lots of interesting conversations with MDs, owners, HR, where they've absolutely not wanted to engage with any recruitment company. It's usually based on what's happened in the past. And I think the two most common ones for me, issues they have with recruitment companies is, let's say you're an MD of an engineering company, you're wanting to recruit a mechanical engineer, and I basically sit in front of you and promise you the earth. Yes, I can get them with this skill set, with that background, on budget, within location. There'll be a, absolute, perfect culture fit. And you go, right, Matt, off you go, 2 or 3 weeks. Let's see what we can come up with. And then two things happen. Either you don't hear from me because I've got absolutely no options. So where's Matt? He's not returning my calls. And the other option is I provide a short list that, you're wondering who I've spoke to
scraped it together.
Yeah, literal hodgepodge of complete, wasting your time. And obviously time's money. You're sat there thinking, right, I've trusted this recruitment company, and they've wasted my time. So promising the earth, under-delivering and disappearing.
And from your point of view, what's the most annoying part for you as the recruiter? Is it that you set these appointments up and then people don't turn up to an interview? Is it customers pulling the rug under you? What's the worst part?
What of
you trying to put someone in a position?
So I think with regards to candidates not turning up, I think luckily, touch wood, within the line of work I operate, that doesn't happen very often at all. 1 in 20, 1 in 30, maybe no-shows. 99% of the time I'm being informed prior to that. Car's broken down, I've decided not to go. Sometimes it's last minute.
Better offer.
So it's frustrating, but genuinely most of the relationships I have with my customers, they know that I'm not doing this on purpose. It does happen now and again. So it can be frustrating, but luckily it doesn't happen that often. The difficult piece for, I think, most recruitment companies is getting a company that shares your values and has the time to invest in you to help them find the best talent they can get. That's a critical one for me. That if they're willing to spend the time speaking to me, then I'm absolutely willing the time to invest and spend with them.
Yep.
Appreciate they might have been hurt in the past by recruiters. So my job in that short space of time is to become completely credible. So I want to talk about relevant companies, relevant roles, and then, dig out loads of people in the industry that we both know that you can go to and speak with. Say, right, you worked with that Matt. Car crash? Or did he actually know what he was talking about and did he communicate with you throughout the process?
Mm-hmm. You've never used me as a reference.
Have I not? Oh, just an oversight. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah. I'd just tell them the truth.
Yes.
What challenges are Wynne facing at the minute? I sort of guess, because we're all facing skills gap issues, but...
So finding people with the right skill sets has always been, I think, going back over the past 10, 15 years I've done this job, we're always faced with different hurdles and barriers that pop up. So Brexit, for example, is a classic one. I think the biggest challenge we tend to find, interestingly, isn't usually finding candidates for roles. It's finding companies that we basically align with, and we're able to have a genuine, exclusive, working, long-term sort of relationship. Lots of recruitment companies still go down the route of going out to a few agencies for a role, which I understand why. But we're kind of past that phase now, and we're in a position where we kind of want to vet the company we're working with just as much as they're well entitled to vet any recruitment company they deal with. A big thing for, I guess, recruiters is understanding their place alongside talent acquisition, which is popping up more and more in a lot of companies. You'd probably be surprised to find that we work with loads of companies that have talent acquisition. Our role isn't to essentially replace them, it's to work alongside them on difficult, tricky, high volumes of sort of workload that comes in from time to time. So it's, again, communication. It's communicating that we don't want to take your role, we don't want to do all your recruitment necessarily. We basically want to find if we're aligned, if you're a growth business, and can we have a genuinely sort of mutually beneficial relationship going forward.
And have any of them relationships gone wrong? Are there any, without naming names, obviously, any customers that you've walked away from, or they've walked away from you?
Yeah, okay. So there's definitely companies that you kind of realise that they're, unfortunately afterwards you realise that perhaps their reputation and their sort of position in the market isn't kind of on brand with how you want your business to be seen and the candidates you put forward. There's nothing worse for me than placing somebody in a role and then them leaving within 3-6 months. I'd rather we didn't actually place the role and we waited a bit longer if we could afford to, and we get it right. I don't get a buzz getting a placement. As weird as that sounds, for me the buzz is a year down the line and I ring somebody up and I'm loving my job, Matt. And the customer's like, really glad we took him, her on, and they're doing a brilliant job.
Any interview horror stories? I've got one I can remember that happened to me.
Oh right, goodness. Okay.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go on.
It wasn't quite a horror story. It was just it was a very uncomfortable situation. I went for an interview. This obviously a long time ago, but sat in a room, table like this. I was here. The hiring manager was there. HR lady was opposite me. Probably an hour interview. 45 minutes of it was me and the HR lady. She obviously had a list of questions, some of them very technical. It was a driver's position back then. That I answered them all. The hiring manager didn't say a word, just stared at me the whole time, to the side of my head. And then right at the end said, and I quote, "When I'm trying to find myself a good sales guy is like when I'm trying to find myself a good woman." And then awkwardly stared at the HR woman, who obviously felt extremely uncomfortable. That was the end of the interview. Of course, I never worked for that company.
Wow.
That person still worked at that company.
Really?
Yeah.
You'll have to tell me after.
I will, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Any candidate stories?
So really awkward. 10 years ago, South Wales had a candidate on interview with a system integration company, PLC SCADA Automation Systems. And he'd turned up for the interview, the meeting again, I think it was a Costa's or something like that, meeting the MD. And to fast forward a little bit, I always ring candidates usually after an interview. How did it go? You know, did it go well, etc. Feedback. And I rang him and he didn't answer, which I thought was a bit odd. He'd said he'd call me straight after the interview. Anyway, fast forward a bit more. Next day, the MD rings me at like 8:30, quite early. I'm thinking, oh, hopefully this is good news. This is usually a good sign. Hopefully good feedback, maybe an offer, we don't know. So I get the call and he's like, all right, Matt. He said, how well do you know this candidate? I said, why? And he was like, well, he'd obviously done his prep, but I'll tell you what I asked him as our opening question. I simply asked him, right, have you done some research in our company? Would you like to give me just a couple of minutes overview? What do we do? What markets are we involved in? I'd like to know what you know. And he said, obviously bearing in mind we're a system integration company, Matthew. This candidate of yours, emphasis on yours, brilliant, my ownership, continued to talk about cranes and lifting systems for about 5 minutes until I thought, right, now's the sweet spot. And I just said, do you think we make cranes? He was like, yes. And he'd basically, poor guy, he'd got muddled with obviously another interview he'd got lined up. So, yeah, shock horror, unfortunately. He didn't get the job.
But he did prep for another interview.
He obviously did the prep.
Yeah.
You know, I always do tell people, you've got to do your prep. Another one that isn't a candidate one is my horror story that I still take. It comes out every year or two and someone will mention it in the office. So I was doing work for a HMI manufacturer, Proface, so part of Schneider. So this was easily over 10 years ago. And I had a guy on interview and he was based in South London and the interview was 10 o'clock at their office, which I think was Coventry Way. And I was like, right, interview's on Thursday, 10 o'clock, John, right, get yourself there. Did all his prep. I don't know what time he'd got up in the morning. You can tell where this is going maybe. Drives up there, gets to the office, gets let in, and the person that's interviewing them isn't there because they're on holiday. And it turned out that I'd sent him on interview a day early. So his interview date was the Friday and I'd sent him on the Thursday. So I get this call 10 minutes after the interview's supposed to have started thinking, this is never a good sign. 10 minutes in. And to be fair to him, he didn't yell at me. And luckily he'd had a friend or family member that lived nearby. He booked the next day off.
Right.
And a guy called John Sewell, he did get the job. Look him up on LinkedIn. So that was genuinely mortifying.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Okay. I always go into, obviously we touch on skills, but around next generation of engineers.
Yeah.
And I think you're in a very good position because you talk to thousands of engineers to sort of work out personality types and work out skills that people have. So what would you say are the key skills that would make an engineer successful or just someone in manufacturing successful?
Yeah, okay. So I think I get asked this a lot and I basically speak to a lot of friends and family and colleagues and I help a lot of customers, family members when they're, in college or finished college, they've got an engineering degree and they're looking for a job and they ask for advice and direction. I think the number one thing everybody has to do, no matter what walk of life you're in, is understand you as a person and ultimately what you enjoy, what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like. I think there's a lot of people in jobs that they're just not correctly suited for. There's a lot of salespeople I speak to that should be engineers, and a lot of engineers I speak to that I think, you were a classic example. You were an engineer, but I was like, the first time I spoke to you, I'm like, you need to be in sales. That's what you were born to do. You wouldn't stop talking. And
I know I'm a very good engineer.
all the rest of it. So I think when I'm speaking to younger people about going into manufacturing, there is absolutely going to be a role for everybody within manufacturing. It's just understanding what you'd enjoy. I'm obviously in sales. I love talking. My wife is an accountant, analytical, detailed, and I think if you're more analytical, detail-orientated, bit of a perfectionist, going down the route of an engineering sort of role or post within a business would be suited to you. If So if you're more outgoing, customer facing, if your earlier, younger jobs were in that area and you enjoyed interacting with people, then again, there'll be not even just a sales role, perhaps a service engineer role. You're going out on site every day, project management role, you're multitasking, dealing with loads of suppliers, trying to get on budget, on time. So I think the first thing you've got to do is understand yourself. And I think there's lots of books out there, audio books, at the gym, walking your dog, going for a run. Just listen and read as much as you can, based around understanding you. And then what that'll quickly do is you'll find other books within industries and markets. Like I always thought I was going to be a policeman, but literally towards the end of my degree, I went to 2 or 3 seminars, open days, and basically listened to people about what is an average day in the life of me, a policeman. I think I had Heartbeat, in the back of my mind, which I used to watch, growing up in a tiny little village. There was 2 boys in my year at school. So it was a very idyllic, small, and see a Bobby on the beat. And I think that's what being a policeman is.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think, but a lot of engineers, I think, see the overalls and they see...
Yeah, that's what I grew up around.
Yeah, you have a picture in your eye of what being an engineer is.
Yep.
But nowadays, with technology, with YouTube, with LinkedIn and social media, you can properly find out all the different roles that are available within engineering, and you can actually see physically what a job looks like.
Yeah. I think that's key actually for, there's a lot of conversation around how we get more people into manufacturing. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers is just the perception of the industry is dirty, it's oily, it's overalls, it's toolboxes. And we go to colleges and schools and universities and we just say to them that actually any career that you think of other than, a YouTuber or whatever.
Yeah, nice.
There are roles within manufacturing and it pays 10% higher than UK average salary. But it's just getting that across to kids that there's a career here where you can really prosper, and it's not turning up in overalls.
It is perception. Like I've worked with companies that have quite bad perception based on what they did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like who their MD was 10 years ago, who wasn't a nice person, or they made some redundancies 10 years ago. Not because they're a bad company, they lost a major account, it was really upsetting and sad and it wasn't their fault. But perception's critical, so candidates would say, I'm not interested in that company, Matt, because the perception is this. And I think engineering's the same. We've got perception of engineering based on the mechanical, clunky. But I genuinely think the 10, 15-year-olds nowadays, when you talk about engineering and software development and so on, they go into robotics and they go to
AI and...
Yeah. And, go and have a look round an open day at an Amazon site and look at what happens and how cool it is and all this, the barcode scanners, RFID, and all this kind of sort of stuff.
Yep.
For me, it's just educating them to educate themselves. Literally go and explore, look at all the roles. But the number one thing is just, from an academic point of view, if you can ultimately understand what kind of role you think you'll like in that area, go and speak to a college, go and look at apprenticeships. That looks like the avenue my son's going to go down now. And that isn't something I pushed on him. That is something that, I'm glad to say that kind of schools and colleagues and colleges have kind of got him into that mindset. Because literally 6 months ago, he was going straight to university. That was the avenue, and now it's changed.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, right. Closers. You mentioned audiobooks. Do you listen to anything out in the car? You're on the road a lot. Podcasts, music, what do you listen to?
So I don't do many podcasts, I think, other than yours, obviously, Tom.
That's it, soundbite.
Nice. But audiobooks, so I'm 41 now, and I've done my backing 3 times in the last year. And my wife keeps saying, the only sport you do is football. It's football that's doing it. You need to stop playing football. I can't do it. Anyway, I went to see a physio, and he was like, at your age, Matt, which was devastating to hear.
I can imagine.
Football is the worst. You're not far off. Football is probably the worst stop, start, twist, turn exercise you can do. You need to start running. So for the past sort of 4 months, every week, twice a week, I get up early and I go for a run. Just 5K, but I've got my audiobooks on. It takes me longer than I'll confess to how long I run for, but I have literally ploughed through more books in the past 3 to 4 months. So James Clear was, I think, the third or fourth book I read. He did a book called Atomic Habits. So that was really interesting. So it was about stacking positive habits that you want to do onto a natural habit you always do. So you get up in the morning, you go do your teeth. If you're wanting to pick a good habit to do, put it next to a default habit you always do.
Okay.
And it'll become habitualized a lot easier than going, do you know what, I have to do 10 push-ups every day.
Yeah, psyching yourself up for it.
And then also your environment. So if you want to read more, when you make your bed, again, if you make your bed a positive habit that you do, put your book on your pillow every day. Doesn't mean you'll read it every day, but your environment's a massive sort of player on that. So that was really interesting.
Okay.
Reading a book called Scattered Minds by a guy called Gabor at the minute, which is quite interesting, linked to ADHD and topics like that. But yeah, definitely read more.
Okay.
I do anyway.
Yeah, it's something I'm really bad at, to be honest.
What's the last book you've read then? Comic.
I don't think I have it.
Comic, sorry.
Yeah, the Beano, yeah.
Oh, nice. It's just online, I guess. A lot of people are online with their...
Yeah, audiobooks I've tried. Stephen Bartlett's last one, I probably got a few chapters in, gave up. Alex Hormozy, 100 Leads, I think it's called, something like that.
Right.
Again, a few chapters. I get bored too easy.
Yeah.
And obviously these days it's like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. It's just constant. That's just, I'm living in 30-second cycles.
Yeah.
If you're lucky to get to 30 seconds, it's normally, just keep swiping.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't read. I know I should, I just don't.
Yeah, I think there's a link with, I think if you look at all the different online mediums now, like you've got your TikTok, you've got skipping to the next film or series on Netflix, you've got Spotify, you've got Tinder, where you literally are able to access lots of things instantly. The second you get bored, the second a topic gets tough, and I think you're starting to see that move into people with their careers. I've been at one company a long time. I've genuinely had really tough times, personally and work-related, where it's been tough. And I think a lot of hiring managers I'm speaking to say that I think an issue with hiring nowadays is getting somebody that, yes, has the skill sets, but is able to roll their sleeves up when things kind of get tough. But I think the generation sort of below us are quite quick to, let's look at the next option. If you want a new job, you can get a new job in 6 months, in a year. It'll eventually catch up with you. But I think there's a lot to be said for loyalty. And one of the most interesting things I say to people when they ring me up out of the blue, because I spoke to them 5 years ago looking for a job, is, do you really want a new job? And have you actually spoke to, what's your motivation for it? And have you actually spoke to your current boss, your current company about this? Oh, well, no, but they won't let me train in this area. They won't, I'm going to get a new house next year and I need another couple of grand and they won't give me. I was like, well, go and have an actual conversation with I think the easy thing is just to look elsewhere, like rather than having that tough conversation. Lack of communication is a massive issue in all walks of life. Certainly hiring and recruiting nowadays, companies need to be better at communicating with their staff, having regular meetings, internal comms. If that improves, retention of staff will massively improve. I've known people who've left for tiny, minuscule non-reasons that could have been addressed pretty easily.
Okay. All right. Do you consider yourself successful?
So I'd have to say yes. Again, it depends on your definition of successful. So from a work and personal life, I'm really, really happy. Hopefully it comes across, I genuinely love my job, passionate about my job, passionate about the industry I work in. I couldn't be a recruiter in any industry. I want to do something that's interesting. I've got to a place in my career where I'm really happy, and every single year we evaluate what we're doing, how we can improve ourselves. I think the reason I have been successful though is, and this will be the case with a lot of people that class themselves as being successful, it's the people that are around you. Because as a team, I think, and as a business, we're successful because we help each other out. Whereas you can go and speak to a lot of companies where they'll have successful people within the company, but they'll have a number of people in there that are really struggling. And it's because they haven't got that team sort of mentality, if you will.
So if you look back on the last 19 years, Would you attribute your success to luck or to hard work?
Is there a third option? Can I say both? So,
Yeah.
okay. So I think I was definitely sort of lucky. I turned up to my interview with Wynne not knowing what the company did. Yeah, and somehow I got the job. There's lots of moments in my career. The reason I got my Siemens meeting was because they thought I was somebody else from a different company. I think Wynne's name is linked to another person, and they're like, okay, well, come and have a meeting. I think you've done work with us before, and I turned up. So there's definite moments that I've been a bit lucky.
Yep.
But I think literally from working at a pub and Centre Parks, I've always had really good managers that have literally instilled a real strong work ethic. And also because I didn't get pocket money from my parents, I've had to go out and earn and work hard to basically earn money and be successful. So ultimately that's basically driven me through my career, a decent work ethic. And you just have to work smart.
Yep.
You know, when I look at roles in companies and new industries and companies I want to target, I look at what sectors are on the growth sort of spectrum, what new technologies are coming. I went to the NEC recently specifically to meet a company that I've never dealt with because I knew they were growing. They'd appointed a new sales director, and also selfishly, he'd come from a sales training background before he moved into manufacturing. So I thought, well, I could probably pick his brains, and the first thing I did when I spoke to him and introduced myself, we have recruited for them since and we're working with them still. I asked him what books he would recommend to anybody that was in sales.
Yep.
And I literally wrote them on my board, and that Atomic Habits one was one of the books
Okay.
he'd actually recommended.
And you said, thanks mate, are you hiring anyone?
No. But yeah, they've got high growth expectations, so
Okay.
nicely aligned with us. So
All right, well that's all the questions.
brilliant. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. Also, it's worth mentioning, huge thank you to you, I suppose, over the years, putting me in positions, in jobs, but then also recent times, you and the guys at Wynne for supporting Engineers Insight.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate it.
No, thanks very much, Tom.
Cheers, mate.